Welcome everyone to Modern Sages. We are excited to explore a huge topic right now. A lot of people are feeling the transition of the Aquarian Age, not sure how to navigate their feelings and their awakening. We also are going to be talking about the divine masculine, the divine feminine, what this means, what this looks like in everyday life.
Welcome to Modern Sages Podcast.
I'm Jenn Gilbreth.
And I'm Candace Coons.
With over 25 years combined, we have delivered messages from beyond,
explored ancient healing wisdom, and integrated these profound teachings into our everyday life.
We are passionate about creating new ways of being human in the modern age by integrating the wisdom of the past with the present and coming into remembrance of who we truly are.
Are you ready to change your relationship to life itself? If the answer is yes, your journey begins now.
Before getting started, of course, as always, we're going to be talking about our herb of the week. And This week we are honing in on nettle.
Yes, stinging nettle. It's so interesting because here again, we're talking about a weed that you would see out in the wild, but this herb is so beneficial because even though it can cause allergies and itching and all of that, at the same time, that very herb can also help you with allergies and the symptoms of allergies. So you can use the leaves you can eat them and put them into a salad. You can dry them, you can put them in soups. It's a very flexible herb to use. And it's one of those primary herbs that everybody should have in their apothecary.
Yes, it's so interesting because it is something where you're like, oh, you can't touch that. It's going to make you itchy. It's going to irritate your body. And of course, this just goes into like the duality of like what the world has to offer, right? Is there's light and dark in all things, and Mother Earth has that as well, where there are some plants, some herbs that can cause irritation, but there's so many benefits if used properly. And so it's kind of funny how there's this duality of life, even in the plants that Mother Earth has given us. So I just think it's so beautiful. And I know that stinging nettle can be very helpful when you have an itchy throat or cold-like symptoms. It can really help soothe your throat. It can help with soothing allergies. It's so good at helping balance out your blood pressure as well. There's just so many good benefits.
Yeah, and during medieval times, they used it for joint pain. So joint pain and inflammation. So again, we have an herb here that helps with pain management. So it can also help with your allergies. It can help with cold symptoms. You can use it for inflammation, for joint inflammation. And people who are struggling with their kidneys and they have a hard time eliminating from the body, the urinary tract, and the bladder, all of those connections and elimination part of the body. So if you have edema or you are retaining a lot of water or swelling, stinging nettle is a wonderful herb to use, which I think is just amazing. So we were talking about this earlier, like what we were going to share. And, you know, this is something that is kind of a primary herb, like according to herbalists. This is one of those things, like if you were to think of your top 10 herbs, you should have this in your kit. And yet we haven't really used it that much, you and I, but it's like it just keeps coming around. It's like, gosh, you need to do this. You need to bring this in. You need to bring this in. So I'm excited that we're finally integrating it today and listening to spirit, right? I'm excited about really exploring this subject, Jenn, because you've been talking about, you're like, I just feel this tremendous prompting from spirit that we need to go deeper with this, that we need to talk about, kind of reiterate what we talked about in our one of our first episodes about being human in the Aquarian Age and what this awakening means and what this feels like, because a lot of people are experiencing so much anxiety and they feel ungrounded with this energy. They don't have really a lot of understanding. And so this was something that you felt we should bring to the forefront. So
it just feels like there's so much awareness, so much opening, so many people becoming aware that there's so much more than the rat race of life, or there's so much more than kind of just like going in pilot mode throughout life. And I think that social media has really been such a positive thing, but I feel like it's also been a huge distraction. And it's almost like this pendulum of like all the things social media has to offer. It almost feels like there's this balancing back of like reminding people like, hey, am I really connected? I've had conversations with many friends who are like, I'm taking a break on social media right now. And I've been able to love really connecting back in. Maybe I want to read a book, or maybe instead of watching a TV show, we go for a walk at night. And it's almost like we think about what people experienced, like my mother, when she was my age, they were outside a lot. They were in nature, they were reading books, where nowadays the generation is like, it's all about TikTok and social media. And it's so interesting how our go-to in life is to kind of numb ourselves out, instead of saying like, hey, what if I didn't have to numb myself out? Or what if I didn't make the world so negative that I didn't want to be fully engaged in life? And I think that a lot of us are coming into this space where there's so much good with it, but there's also so much mindless scrolling. And it's like this awakening is like, hey, what if there's more? What if I'm not feeling connected to the world? And how can I move forward? And of course, this is part of the Aquarian Age. This is part of what the next 2000 years is going to be upholding and really moving into 2000, give or take, of this sense of like, we're here. What an honor it is to be here. And are we fully making the most of it, versus are we just being captive or letting the world run us instead of us participating in co-creation?
This is going to be one of the biggest challenges, is navigating through the information age and the Great Awakening. What is centered in truth and love, and what is centered in fear and distraction and chaos? Because everything is going to be thrown at us at once. There are different times of evolution where we focus on different areas, where we are trying to transmute our physical experience or our emotional experience. Different ages where we explore these lower chakras and really came into the awakening and the fullness of those areas of our lives. The Aquarian age is going to be overcoming the mind. The mind is going to be your biggest challenge in the Aquarian age.
And we see that already. We see
yes,
a lot of people with, with depression, suicide rates are up. I deal a lot with that. And during sessions, there's a lot more medication that people are taking.
mm-hmm.
The mind can feel like such a plague. But if we're not aware of this transition or this change or this energy shifting to the mind, of course we're going to feel distraught and alone and so heavy, unless we're able to look at it in a positive perspective of like, wow, in this lifetime here and now, I get to learn about the mind and how powerful the mind is in creation. And so we can shift that perspective versus, oh, it's all heavy, it's all the mind, it's this mental game. It's like, if we could pull back and ride the wings of the eagle and see it from this whole perspective of like, my higher self is here to learn this, it almost helps relieve the stress or relieve the pressure of what life has to offer.
Yes. And there's been an overemphasis on the importance of the mind, where it's like, okay, the mind is beautiful and it's not something that we should shame. Absolutely not. At the same time, there's been this over-identification with the mind, believing that our mind has something to do with our worth and our identity. And even though we're not in an age where the physical emotional is going to be the absolute focus, but we are still experiencing a physical and emotional reality. We're multidimensional beings. So life will still pull you back in those areas. If there is a disconnect or an imbalance, because you're here to experience your multidimensional self while waking up into the remembrance of who you really are, which is spirit. So part of that unraveling is, it's not to shame the mind, because we don't want to shame it. We want to use it as a tool, right? That's what it's for. We are here to use the mind, and it's extremely powerful, and it will assist us in our co-creation of an ideal setting in our heart-centered lives. And if that's where we're centered, our energy is centered, it should support the vision of the heart. But at the same time, if we don't recognize, though, that we are still here to feel deeply, we are still here to embrace this physical body and the experience of having a physical body. If we don't recognize that, then what will happen is something will be pulled out. It's like, it'll say, okay, well, now you need to focus on this area. But at the same time, we're born in an age where we get to really tackle the mind, because information is being open to us on many levels. It's not just physical knowledge and books and teachings in that sense. It's wisdom, it's information, it is information that has been covered up. Those things will be coming out and revealed to us, and we'll have to integrate that into our reality here in the world of Maya. So there are many, many layers to this. And so it's really expanding your perception of who you think you are, and really kind of broadening that, stretching it out, and saying, okay, well, obviously I'm not my body, and I'm not my emotions, and I'm not my mind. That is what I get to experience in this human vehicle. But I am the observer. I am the spirit that is riding in this amazing human journey. And I get to experience how to use the mind, how to use the physical body, how to embrace emotions, which is the color or the paint on my canvas of my life, my masterpiece. Is we want to embrace all those things. The soul longs for that. So anyway, I think that is what people are kind of exploring, because they're like, gosh, I know there's something more. There's something more to life. There's a different way to perceive.
And how many people, and if you think about that, how many people have expressed since 2020, which we won't go into all of that, but since 2020, it has been this space of, like, almost everyone we've had on the podcast so far has mentioned how that was such a big tipping point for them, of like, gosh, am I living my life? And also this energy of fear or of unknown, is when we have the unknown, it's easy for us to step into fear and to fully be fearful of these things. And it's like, after so long, people are like, I can't be fearful to live. And like, how impactful was 2020 to so many people? And yes, there was a lot of both duality, right? But it almost is like, what a launch or a springboard into this awakening, this self-awareness that so many people are discussing and are talking about now. And it's like, I can't live in fear. And our mind tends to want to go to fear naturally. That's part of this human journey. And it's like, I can't be fearful anymore. I have to keep going. I have to fulfill my soul's desire, my heart's calling, because what if it's over in the blink of an eye, which it will be. And so there's this space of this awareness and this opening that I love you're talking about. It's just so beautifully, like, of course, in the Aquarian age, we're going to have some huge experience. It's going to really bring people into this awareness. And we have, and we're still are going through it, but it's almost like it's just this door opening of saying, hey, let's discover this. Let's dive into this.
Oh, there was the door. Absolutely. You know, that really was a turning point. That pandemic has soul agreements with all of us, because when when there are traumatic things that happen, let's say hurricanes or earthquakes or pandemics, what it forces us to look at is the temporary nature of this reality of the third dimension, the fact that it's so temporal. You don't know, there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees about when you're leaving. You're not going to be here forever. And it's a journey, it's an experience. And what's interesting about it is that even though this is inevitable, even though I don't believe in death, right? I don't believe in death. We are eternal beings. But I make a joke in the sense of that, but nobody gets out of here alive. Nobody does in the human journey. So it's like, okay, well, if that is the case, and we're talking about it because, the last pandemic we had was 100 years ago. So none of us were alive during that time. This is the first for everybody. We didn't know how this was going to affect our lives. We didn't know how this was going to change things. If we were going to get it, if we were going to go, nobody knew. And so anytime when you are pressed up against the wall with this idea of death, then it really makes you go deep within yourself to figure out what is important. You can only get drunk so many days and try to numb yourself and run away from the inevitable. When this is outside, we couldn't go to work. We couldn't escape. There was, this was still there. And so it forced everybody to take things to the next level. It's like, look, if you didn't do the spiritual work before, if you weren't really willing to ask these deep questions, now you're going to be facing these profound questions. Who are you really? And are you living your life to your absolute fullest? Are you aligned with your soul mission? All of these questions start coming up to the forefront so people can center themselves in a different reality, a different frequency. It was a huge shift. It was definitely a door. Like when I was talking about that time, it felt like literally the whole year of 2020, I felt like we were in the birth canal. Like we were just getting ready to be born into this new reality. And then it felt like 2021, the beginning of 2021, we actually arrived. That's what it felt like collectively. And a lot of workers and light workers and healers have been working on this for a long time. And so when we went through 2020 and 2021, it was like all the work that we did, we were midwifing others through this process of rebirth and awakening. And, a lot of people who were going without work and was really struggling, and people who were healers and light workers were actually getting work because people were reaching out to individuals who could help them navigate this journey that they were experiencing that they couldn't put into words, and all of these different emotions and epiphanies that people were having at the time. So for me, it was just such a turning point, and there is no going back. We're never going to go back to that. There is, we literally were able to get front row seats to the new age. And that's why it's such a wonderful, beautiful blessing. And even though it can be kind of scary at times and you don't know what to expect, but that's also what makes it so much more exciting. Absolutely. And fulfilling for the soul.
And I think along with that too is remembering, okay, we are spirit. We are this infinite being of light and of love in this physical journey. There is duality in all things. That's part of the journey. There's happiness, there's sadness, there's joy, and there's heaviness. Like it's literally within everything. And we're so aware of the duality in the world right now, in viewpoints of this or of that. And I think that what we come here to learn is to be aware of the duality. And yes, we may think, okay, this is what I really subscribe with. This really resonates with me. But knowing that there is duality in all things doesn't mean that we have to solely label ourselves with one duality. Like we can be brought to the center and say, I'm aware of both sides. I'm aware of light and dark in all things. But yet, if I label myself so much on one thing, it's causing me to pull away. And I say this in the sense of, let's take organized religion, right? There are so many good things that come from organized religion. And yet
Mhm.
there are some people who have been wounded or are so against it that they're like completely closed off. They're bashing, they're bringing this heavy energy towards it. When in reality, what we're being called to see is yes, maybe something's not drawing for you, it's not there for you, and maybe you're drawn to it. That's perfect. But
Mhm.
when we label ourselves with that's bad or that's wrong, we're taking ourselves, it's not that we're taking ourselves out of the equation because we're here to learn what we're going to learn, but it's almost like we're being called to say, okay, hey, look, there's duality. Where can I find peace within myself that it's
Yes.
not overpowering me in a positive way or a negative way? It's bringing me back to my soul's center so that I can fulfill my soul's contracts here. And maybe that's you being angry at organized religion for your whole life, whatever that is. But at the same time, it's like, but there's so much more that we're here to fulfill and here to accomplish. Is it serving you or is it holding you back? And that's just one experience of your viewpoint upon it. Not saying you have to not be in it or not. All I'm saying is how we're viewing something and the duality connected to it. Is it serving us or is it causing us to have this spiral in our mind that's not allowing us to see any other perspective? And
Mhm.
that's just one experience, right?
Oh, yes. And you brought up a point earlier, like the eagle's eye view.
Yeah.
And this is one of the other great gifts about the Aquarian age because it's connected with the element of air. And the guardian of air is the eagle. It's the eagle's perspective. One of the amazing gifts of the eagle is that it can see the overall picture. It's able to kind of pull itself out of the forest and say, okay, where does all of this connect? I'm not really focused on this or that. And I'm not going to pendulum in this duality or in that duality. But where can I find that common ground? Because when you are awakening to your multidimensional self, your authentic self, you have to embrace the reality that you are one with everything. There is no separation. You can't say, hey, I'm just going to push you this over here. I'm going to push this over there. I don't want a part of this. It's not that you, because you're one that you choose into darkness, but at the same time, you understand that light and dark and duality is all part of creation. It's all part of the one. And so when I choose into that kind of experience, I say, okay, I understand, I recognize that all things exist. And when I'm exploring a subject matter, I'm going to choose the path of love, not fear. And that's a choice. We're here to practice our free agency and free will. The law of the universe is free will.
Absolutely.
So creation, us exploring creation, the creator is never going to tell us what to do. We have to decide ultimately what part of creation we want to be an experience, right? So I choose into the path of love. So if I choose into the path of love and I'm in a room of Buddhists, Hindus, Christians, Muslims, Jewish people, atheists, agnostic, New Agers, pagans, as a medicine woman, I come into that circumstance, and that's only a part of all the world religions, right? There's so many, and non-religion. But as a medicine woman, I come in and say, all of these individuals are my brothers and sisters of humanity.
We are one.
We are one. Where can we find the connection? Where can we find that common ground? It's not about saying, okay, I'm going to say, you were wrong and you were wrong and you're wrong for how you experience life. And only I am right for the
Right.
way that I experience life. That is a different lens. I honor their journey. It is not my responsibility to tell them or to force upon them what I think or what I think they should do, because that is for me an act of sorcery when I push my will upon someone else, whatever that is. And a lot of people engage in sorcery who don't realize they're engaging in sorcery.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because they're trying to enforce their will upon someone else and saying, you know what? We are one. You have the wisdom of the whole universe inside of you. I honor your journey, whatever that looks like. Where can we come to a common ground of love?
Mm-hmm.
Love is the common ground. Always.
Absolutely.
That's
And
the common ground.
yes. And I love that you're talking about this, because I was telling you how I've been listening. We both have been listening to the surrender experience, which was so funny. I was like, Candace, you have to listen to this. And you're like, I am right now.
Right now in this moment.
It was
That was so cool.
So cool. But also when you're talking about the space of sorcery, or the space of what we hold on to, is when we first got started working with you, you told me to read the 4 agreements, and what was the other one?
The invitation.
So I bought that, but then I had it in my truck and we went fishing and it flew out or something. So I started like 2 chapters in, and I'm like, clearly it wasn't supposed to read it. Yeah. But then again, Curtis and I, my husband, we just were like, let's read this book again, the 4 agreements. And at one point, he literally at the beginning talks about how our thoughts and our mind, how if we're saying something negative to someone, or we're putting negative thoughts, or we're bringing in this heaviness into someone's space, essentially we're using black magic.
Yep.
We are bringing that into someone's existence, or we're, maybe someone, we know that they're insecure about something and we're mad. So we're going to throw that little shoulder in there and bring up this heaviness. Well, that's the same concept of sorcery or black magic, or this heaviness that's there. And we don't think that we're doing it. We think, oh, I would never do that. But when we're labeling someone,
like the witch wound is like, oh, this is what sorcery looks like.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Or when we're labeling someone, or when we're making someone else wrong, maybe someone's opinion about their medical freedom versus someone else's medical freedom, right? When we're making someone else wrong, I would encourage us to sit with that and see, is this really serving my higher perspective now? Like, am I feeling happy? Or is this stress actually causing my body to feel physical ailments? Because that's our reality. That's what we're here to do. And it's noticing, I don't know, I just think that we're in this space of really learning and growing. And I'm trying to find this perfect quote about that. So while I do that, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, people have all of these ideas about what that is, what is bad energy, and, and people don't realize that when you're out there judging someone, or you are out there shaming someone, or you're trying to overpower or misuse your power by shaming them or trying to get them to do what you want them to do, that energy is, first of all, it's not centered in love. No matter if you are doing it because, let's say, unconsciously you're like, gosh, I'm just really concerned about this individual, and so every time you talk to them, you're trying to get them to do what you want them to do because you're worried about them. But that energy is still rooted in fear. It's not rooted in love, trust, and faith. That is the common ground every single time, no matter what cross point you come to, or what energy you come up against. And I know it sounds cheesy, but the typical quote, love is the answer. It's the truth. Love is the answer. When you're navigating all of this information and all of these different perspectives and all of these different ways of life and culture and everything else, and all the different races and all these different things that we're trying to, men and women, okay, even that, coming together, and you're trying to find the answer. Love is the answer. How can you communicate in a way and hold space in a way that's centered in love for this other being that you are in contact with?
Absolutely. I agree. I totally agree. So I found this, I wanted to read some of this. Chapter 2, it's the first agreement. So in this book, he talks about these agreements that we as humans take on and we live with. And it dictates how we live life, how we perceive life, what we do. And so this is a way of helping us step outside of those agreements that we might not want to subscribe to, but yet that's just naturally what comes within. But here, so of course, this is the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Mm-hmm.
And it says,
he is a Toltec shaman.
Okay. So it's all perfect. It all makes sense.
Yes.
So he says, why your word? Your word is power that you have to create. Your word is the gift that comes directly from God. And it talks about in the Bible, the word at the beginning was the word, and the word was good, right? And the word was God. And then here it goes, the word is not just a sound or a written symbol. The word is a force. It is the power you have to express and communicate, to think, and thereby to create the events of your life. You can speak. What other animals, what other in this world, what other has that ability to speak in those words? And then the last part is saying, depending upon how it is used, the word can set you free or it can enslave you even more than you know. All the magic you possess is based on your word. Your word is pure magic, and in misuse, your word is black magic. And then he goes into talking about that more. But I think that that's where we're at, is it's like, what is resonating, what's not, what's serving me, what's not, but not making others wrong. If something is serving them perfectly and it's not you, that's okay. It's okay to find that balance within yourself. And ultimately, that love, that positivity, that space, like you're saying, love is the answer, which sounds so like, yeah, love is the answer. But in reality, that's what we came here to experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think this is perfect too, because in this space, we've also like the pendulum has been focused a lot on this feminine power, feminism, like this is all about it, which yes, this is beautiful. And there's so much that's needful. But I also think that it undercuts the masculine energy. Mm-hmm. And it also says, I feel like there's this balance of like, yes, men also have a harder time coming into spirituality or spiritual gifts, which that's not true. But I also think that there's this, like these boundaries around it where it's like, oh, you can't meditate, or you can't sit still, or you can't co-create in a way that's more feminine than masculine, because we are both. We have the yin and the yang. We mm-hmm. have duality within us. And so even these 2 books that I've been diving into so deeply also have been written by that masculine energy. Mm-hmm. And it's bringing that into balance and showing, yes, we have feminine, and yes, we have masculine. And there's a duality within every single one of us, regardless of what we decide that we want to identify with or whatever, there is this give and this take, It's in everything. It's in our body. It's in the heartbeat of our life. And yet we try to dominate one side or the other, when in reality, it's a flow. It's a balance. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that is part of the integration of the Aquarian age that we are all experiencing. And that is the other part of it. And you are masculine and you are feminine. You know, in the first episode, we talked about how I explain the multidimensional self and the experience of creation, or our kingdom. And the inside, I always talk about the king and the queen being the masculine and the feminine, the divine masculine expression of us and the divine feminine expression of us. And the night is the mind, and the child is the emotion part of us. And the inner landscape is Mother Earth and our connection to creation. So when we talk about that masculine feminine aspect, I agree, there's been such an imbalance, because it's like any time that there's an imbalance of energy, humanity tends to pendulum one direction for a while before it comes back into a healthy balance, right? Yeah. And so everything has been hyper focused around the divine feminine, and the women being able to do what the men do, and making an extra point of it, that, you know, whatever men do, women do, all of that stuff. And that is beautiful and amazing. At the same time, we can overcompensate in those areas when, again, we over identify with our sex, when we over identify with this human body, when we over identify with labels and ideas about what that means, and then we start getting stuck again. We go back deep into the dream of Maya. We make ourselves miserable because we just over attach, and that is kind of a tendency on this human journey, is to overcompensate. We're in areas where we felt like we didn't have that balance. And
Yeah.
you'll find this with any areas of balance and justice, because the heart has to do with justice. It has to do with balance, and the mind has to do with justice. And so justice is an air sign. It has to do with laws. It has to do with organization. So all of this stuff is going to come to the forefront to say, well, is it in balance? And if it's not in balance, do something about it. So what does this mean? What does this mean, this divine masculine, this divine feminine? And how does this show up in our lives? Because if we're both, how does this interact within us? Right? Well, for example, we would not be doing this podcast if we were pendulumed in the divine feminine energy, because the divine feminine energy is the visionary. She is the courageous energy inside of you that says, this is what I want to create. This is my dream. This is what's heart-centered. This is what's aligned with my spirit. This feels authentic for me. It's centered in love. That is the energy of the divine feminine energy. The divine masculine energy within us says, okay, what can I do to bring that vision, that dream into form? It is the action energy within us. It is the part of us that gets organized, the part of us that creates structure, the part of us that shows up every day to do what we need to do to fulfill those dreams, to manifest those dreams.
Absolutely.
If you pendulum on the masculine, then you're going to feel lost. You're going to feel lost. Like, why am I here? What is my why? What does my heart want? What is my soul song? What is the thing that I want to share with the world? I feel lost. I've got all of this energy. I have all of this anxiety inside me. I feel like I'm going to burst, and yet I don't know where to direct this energy.
Yeah, and you can get easily stuck in the monotony of life, of just surviving to get things done, of making it happen, and it's like looking back was that very fulfilling? And so bringing in the masculine, the feminine, it brings in this perfect balance of fulfillment.
Yes.
Which ultimately we all yearn for. We all desire that fulfillment space. So I love that, because it's this visionary, and then it's moving things forward. It's making it happen. I always like to describe it, and I know I always talk to you about this, but we have the right side and the left side. And the right side is like, in my space, when I do sessions, I always talk about how delivering messages, it's like I tend to turn the volume down on the left side, which is the questioning. It's the more of the dominant. It's the connection to the world, almost like this minimal, like this human instinct of talking to dead people. That's not something that we think is very common. Like in the physical realm, it's like, can we really do that? Where I turn that down and I turn up the volume of the right, which is the spiritual, it's the trusting, it's the flowing. But then also I like to do editing. I like to do videos. I've worked on our on our podcast, on our website. And so it's like, you have to have a balance of both to make things happen.
Yeah.
And it's so funny today when I was taking a shower, I became very aware that there was a teacher in my sacred meadow. And I felt this male standing in my sacred meadow. And I was like, okay, I need to go into there and I need to learn what he has to offer. And so, that's not very uncommon for me. I've had that happen to me a couple of times. And when I came in, I'm still trying to figure out who he is or what it is, but he was talking about breath work. And he showed me this vision of, we have this tube, which we do the tube of light all of the time, where we're calling upon the higher heavens, that great spirit, source energy, God's love. We call upon that, and then it aligns us all the way down to Mother Earth. But I was viewing it as like this funnel of energy where it's like, okay, I have this divine energy coming within, and then it was connected to my heart space, and it would go into my heart space. And then from my heart center, it would funnel back out into Mother Earth. And it was a sign of bringing in spiritual creation and then physically bringing it into existence. And I had the power of saying, okay, I can open that valve in my heart center to be aware of it, to be aware of what the next step is. And then I get to go out and play and create it in the world. And that is beautiful. That's the feminine, the masculine in action of bringing in this information, opening it up in my heart, creating, and then bringing it out into the world.
Birthing it into the world. Yes.
And we need to have both of those feminine, masculine, the yin and the yang, that energy to really help us feel fully fulfilled in this lifetime.
Absolutely. Yes, gosh, that's such a beautiful vision. Just as you were explaining that, I could just feel that energy. And a lot of people who study chakras and energy work, and we've talked about this too, is that there is a flow of energy. If you're receiving energy and it's moving down the chakras, it has a manifesting energy that it brings. It aligns you with your higher self, and then it has an energy of like when you think about something you want to create, it brings it into the world. When we bring energy up the chakras, it's more about reconnection back into spirit. And so there is even a direction of the way energy flows, and we can use the breath in order to direct this energy to receive it coming down or to exhale and to send it out. There's different ways that you can use the breath or prana for different things. And so it just reminded me of like that whole vision and how energy works, of how you bring in things into form and how you literally, it's like it goes down through the root chakra. So it comes in through the top parts of your chakras. It's here. And this is where we receive visions. This is where we cultivate those dreams. And it meets within the bridge between heaven and earth, which is the heart. That is that valve that you were talking about, right? It's that connection between heaven and earth within us, and making a conscious choice to open up that. It was like, now the flow is coming in. So now I can create vision, and I can bring it into form. It is moving through the lower chakras. It's exiting out of my root chakra into the world. You're birthing this into the world. And that's just how energy works. It's just, and that's a whole other show. We could go and talk about even more about that.
Right.
But I love how when we can look at someone and we can say, you know what, brother, sister of humanity, we are all connected. And inside of each human being is the masculine and the feminine within them. They hold creation inside of them, even if they don't recognize that within themselves. And I believe that you can bring your dreams into fruition and manifestation. That whole concept is centered in balance of the masculine and feminine that we carry within us. And that is the opportunity that we're being given in the Aquarian Age, because the Aquarian Age is about integration and balance and awakening into our multidimensional self. We don't have to leave in order to remember. That door has been opened. We don't have to come here anymore into a human form and completely fall asleep. And this is why we are also going to see in the Aquarian Age more children being born into the world fully awake, remembering the other side, remembering spirit, seeing spirit, remembering past lives. We need to awaken this in order to support the new energies that are coming to the world. We have to step up. We're rising into this awareness.
Absolutely.
It's just the way it is. And people can either believe it or not, But if they don't believe it, I just say, just sit back and enjoy the ride, because it's going to
Absolutely.
be a ride.
Yeah, absolutely. And before closing up this podcast, there was going into that space of children and in that area and going back to the valve is also at times we might have experienced this influx of energy, this awareness as a child, and it might have been too much for us to handle. So we just closed that whole valve and we're like, I can't handle that. I just have to be here. And it's also we're taught naturally we're taught to live in that lower, the not the upper and the lower valve or the funnel, but the lower funnel.
Mhm.
And it may seem scary or intimidating or like too much to open up that valve to receive that first funnel of energy coming into your space. And I've recently started doing a teenage class with Gifts of Spirit. And the first thing we talk about is all about duality. We talk about that because most of them are experiencing or have experienced a lot of dark or heavy spirits. And they can close it off where it's like, no, when you're aware of that, it's actually giving you the opportunity to say there is positive and negative. And if I'm aware of it, I can control what I'm connecting into. And if you're yearning to open up that valve of spirituality or of this higher understanding of who you are, you don't have to have a flush of energy coming in. It may feel like that for some people, but it can also open up and it can be a beautiful flow of energy coming down versus just this fire hose of information or this fire hose of energy where some of us experience that huge rush of water. That wasn't one of my experiences, but I know other people who have. And we have the ability to say, hey, I want to open it and I want to experience this higher understanding. And if you're listening to this podcast, more than likely you've already been experiencing that or you're drawing
Mhm.
into that energy. And so just knowing that it is safe to do that, that you have control of what you experience. And
Yes.
even if you experienced heaviness when you were a child, that doesn't mean that has to be your living experience now. And so I would just encourage you, like, do it, dare to dream, dare to do it. But no, there's proper ways of alignment that can help you fully connect in. And that's what I would recommend is going to our YouTube channel. Candace has a beautiful tube of light and her cute little doggy, beautiful tube
My
of light
children.
meditation to help get you going in that space.
What I love about too that you brought up was that you can choose into this experience. A lot of people, when they're going through their awakening, there are fears about seeing things that are dark, or maybe they have experienced those things. And a lot of times, when you do a property cleansing, when you come and do as a shaman, and you basically through that process, you are bringing this awareness back to the individual that they have the power to choose what they will engage with and what they will not engage with. And so when I work with people with gifts of spirit, or I work with people doing property cleansings, and same with you, a big part of that is understanding still that this is a free will universe. And yes, all these things do exist. And it's important that you be aware of it. It's not good, I think, to not be aware of that. At the same time, you can still choose into what you will engage with, what's going to come into your space, what your experience is going to be. And a lot of people don't recognize that. They don't understand how much power they have and what they can choose into, right? When it comes to gifts of spirit. So what I do sometimes with students, and I think you remember us doing this, but we made a gifts of spirit contract where we actually made a contract and wrote it down in the journal. Like, this is how I want to be communicated with. This is how intensely I want it to be. I don't want to be dealing with X, Y, and Z. I only want to be dealing with this. And a lot of people don't realize that they can do that. So I'm so glad that you brought that point, because a lot of people are like, well, what does this mean, and how is that going to be experienced, and it can seem very overwhelming for people when they're opening up and waking up to their gifts of spirit and really opening up that channel completely into their
Absolutely.
multidimensional self. But you can choose. You can choose
Yes.
into what you will experience and what will be allowed in your space.
Absolutely. And I think it's perfect because we are in the Aquarian age. We are in the space where we're deciding what's right or wrong, what feels good for me, what doesn't. And it's so important that we can trickle out or filter out those thoughts or those agreements that we have been taught that spiritual gifts is bad or it's wrong or it's not acceptable. It's not of God, because it is. It's literally directly from God.
Directly. Yes.
And knowing that, it's just this space of giving you courage and strength. You're not alone in this journey. You're not alone in this process. There are many people who are in this space. And it's important for you to go through this knowledge of all these things coming in, like Candace said earlier, to what feels right for you. The spirit of discernment is real, and it's okay for you to lean on that. And so I just feel like this subject has been something that, like, I feel my whole body pulsing of just like, this is what we needed to talk about and share. And of course, we are here for your journey. We're here for whatever it is that you need. So you can reach out to us. You know, we're just opening up this space of offering a lot more tools and, you know, journey work and shamanic teachings and gifts of spirit. We're leaning and jumping into all of that because we know it's so needful now. And so we just want to thank you for your journey. We want to give you courage and strength. Know you're not alone and that you're not crazy in this world.
You're not crazy.
You're not. This is part of the journey, and it's beautiful and it's holy. So just hang on and enjoy the roller coaster ride, because either we can enjoy it or we can suffer through it. And enjoying is a lot more fulfilling and a lot more exciting.
It is, for sure.
Thank you so much for listening. We are so blessed to have you in our space and in our corner with all that we're doing here at Modern Sages. So thank you so much. Blessings, love, and light.
Thank you for watching Modern Sages. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
We are so grateful for your support. If you want to follow us, we have an Instagram account as well as on Facebook. We have our podcast, which is the Modern Sages podcast as well.
And we are so excited to launch our Gifts of Spirit classes in our Modern Sages Mystery School.
Absolutely. Oh, we're so excited. So we're going to link the information below in the show notes for more information about our mystery school.